to say we have to investigate these sheriff's departments, these police departments, these whatever you want to call them, FBI, due to the fact that there is an epidemic of pornography, child abuse. We've got questions, a lot of big questions of some cases I'm working on right now.
So why did they suspect you of these threats again, or the harassment to the judge? Why did they suspect it was you?
There was none. It was the harassment to the judge was engineered by them. The whole thing was a prescription. There was no. I had no contact with the judge or his office or anything. I never made any comments, and they knew all that. But they had to fabricate something so horrific to justify the retaliation that they were going to do. They're going to kill me and blame me because I was such a bad guy. I'm just terrible. Well, it failed.
Wow. And your 4-year-old son, he was 4 at the time. You had him in your arms when you came out of the house.
I was taking him to daycare.
You were taking him to daycare?
Yes.
Wow.
He's been totally traumatized, and they have not let up on him. They have done everything they could to him.
And how old is he now?
He's 25.
And you pled? Did you plead not guilty?
Absolutely.
And you still had to serve 6 months?
I served 6 months, 10 days before trial, and then another 10 months after trial for telling my attorney he was on the hook.
So, did you have custody of your son at the time, or?
I was living with his mother. We were married.
Oh, okay. So there wasn't like a dispute or anything like that. It just seems so crazy.
It's beyond crazy. It's beyond crazy. Which is very unusual. The FBI, in fact, McCorkle made statements to the Toledo Blade, said I should be sent away for life. 25 years was not enough, and that's still in the archives. You can still pull that up. You can also pull up the Shoddy, former Toledo FBI director, for his involvement in the abduction in Alexandria, Virginia.
How did you? So you were working as a process server, right?
Oh yeah.
And you became. How did you become an informant for the FBI? How did that? I mean.
Well, I saw something that was horrifically wrong, and it's being protected, and I knew that the only way that these drug rings, these huge rings, can operate is with payoff to sheriffs, payoff to judges, on and on and on. And the sad thing about it is, in our country, we've got drug check for just about every job you can imagine, except attorneys and judges. They don't have to do drug testing. Police officers very seldom have to do drug testing. So when I would see stuff like that, I would be very outspoken. I don't, I've been told to keep your mouth shut, and I don't take it very lightly when somebody tells me to keep my mouth shut. And so I have to pay the price.
Uh-huh. And you were also, so they describe you as a bounty hunter.
Most of the work that I did was going after bail bonds violations that were large, very large. I wouldn't do anything domestic. A lot of the work was where there were children missing or had been abducted, and the police were lying and tried to try to find the child, try to get somebody to do something right way, and that's really not an uphill battle. You don't usually don't get it. Law enforcement don't do anything to protect the child. None at all.
Wow. So,
and one of the things I took on, a family come to me. They had their son was in Little League in Findlay, Ohio, and the Little League players were getting burnt by something that was on the playground, chemical burns. And I can remember taking a trip in an airplane and flying over, and you could see a patch where all the grass was gone, nothing was living. And I got to checking, and we found out that the city of Findlay were using a chemical called methyl ethyl ketone, and when they got done with its whatever, it's a solvent, but it's very toxic. They were dumping it outside their city garage, and what happened was it was leaching and overrun was gone onto this playground. And I went to the local authorities and got nowhere, which really irritated me. And I went to the EPA in Bowling Green, Ohio, and they did nothing. That irritated me more. And I went to the Attorney General's office, and there's a young black guy by the name of Chris King. And if you go on the internet now, Chris King has got his own, he does videos and so forth about the criminal activities in the New England area. It's called KingCast. But Chris advised me, he said, you're up against a battle that being in the home of Marathon and Cooper and these heavyweight players, he says, you're not going to get anywhere. But he says, I got a friend that I went to college with in Chicago who works for the EPA. So he gave me the guy's phone number. I called him. They called in an investigative team out of Willoughby, Ohio. Came in, found out that everything that I had found was true. They they arrested or filed a complaint with the Findlay and set up that they're in violation. It's an administrative court out of the 5th District in Chicago. And this U.S. attorney worked with me directly, and they then had their process and so forth, and they found the city was liable and ordered that they clean up the mess, which was over $1 million, and that they were supposed to show up. They didn't show up for court, so they took out a $2.8 million judgment against the city, and the city were not happy about that. And Tom called me, and he said, do you know the mayor? And I said, yeah, he's the new mayor, John Stosik. I said, he says, what do you want me to do, Tom? And he says, well, we're not interested in costing the city a lot of money. We just want those individuals that were involved in this crime to be indicted and send a message that you can't injure children in the United States and get away with it. Well, I went and talked to John Stosik, who I knew personally, and before the meeting was over, why he was no longer my friend. He ordered me out of his office and told me don't ever come back, and on and on and on. It got a little ugly, and I just laughed, and I went to shake his hand. He flipped me off, and so what? Anyways, then I went back and told Tom Nash what had happened. He says, okay. They set down a hearing, and Tom Nash told me to be available when the hearing, so that if they had any questions, they could ask me. Well, about 5, 6, maybe 7 o'clock at night, I get a phone call from Tom, and he said, Roger, we've worked it out. He said the city's going to pay $150,000 in a fine. They have to pay for the cleanup and the monitoring of this area where this was at. And he says, plus I got an ace. He says, and Judge Green, who was the judge on this case, wants your approval since you're the one that turned it in and helped us to get this conviction. He said, their sewer plant is contaminated, heavily contaminated with heavy metals, as amongst of other things. He says, I don't know what's in there, but it's really bad. I said, well, what do you want? He said, Judge Green wants to know if you would, we can order them to build a new sewer plant within 8 months. He says it's going to be over $100 million. He says, but the Superfund will pick up about half of it. Since Mike Oxley, Congressman Mike Oxley, is from Findlay, they'll pick up about half of it. But he said it's still going to cost the city $100 million. And I said, will this clean things up and will be a better place for the children in Findlay? And he says, absolute. And I says, well, she has my approval. Now, City of Findlay has never been told that story. The people of Findlay's water bill and sewer bill tripled. They don't know why. They were just it was astounding. It was in the newspaper. Some people were paying more for water and sewer than their house payment were. So that come to fruition. That's been 20-some years, almost 30 years ago, I think, when that happened. And believe it or not, the EPA is still doing their work to sanitize that area where this contamination was. They're still,
Sure.
So the city's still paying for that. Okay.
So I want to ask you two things. So you were what was the outcome of what was the verdict? Were you vindicated on this case?
I was found not guilty of any threats against the judge. However, they charged me with a threat to the attorney. I told him he was on the hook on his voicemail, which the tower for his voicemail was across the state line. So they said that was a violation of the federal law because the threat went across a state line, which was total BS. Number one, he's on the hook was because Sam Morrison had made a false report to the Hancock County Sheriff's Department about stuff that he and an attorney by the name of Richard Neller were stealing property, had a auctioneer assistant help them and steal this property and sell it, and he would give them the money, and then they pocketed the money, which was totally illegal. And I found out about it and made it known to Mr. Morrison what a piece of garbage he was, and he was on the hook. I know that President Trump uses on the hook a lot. Other people say it. Doesn't mean that there's a life-threatening situation. He's on the hook. He's a crook. Mm-hmm. However, Mr. Morrison was never charged with lying to the grand jury, federal grand jury. He was never charged with his theft, never charged with reporting a false statement to the sheriff's department. He wasn't charged with anything. And in fact, they thought that evidently he was a superboy for them, but they sent me away for 16 months, 10 days as a result.
Wow. So what do you think? What do you think about this case with Roger Stone?
I don't think they're going to get Roger Stone to jump through the hoop for him. I don't think that it's going to happen. I think Roger Stone has got enough dirt on him, and he's going to expose it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as far as the court process goes, what do you think? How do you think that's going to go down?
The courts are so corrupt, I don't know how they're going to go down. Here's one thing that was interesting. In my sentencing in the last 10 months, there was Judge James Carr that had a pile of books on his podium, and he stood up and he slammed them down, and he said, Tanner, you can tell your buddies you don't mess with me. Oh, he said James Carr, don't mess with James Carr. Well, we knew, I say we, the investigators I work with, knew that Spielbusch, which is where the federal court is, had been involved in illegally bringing in children, student exchange children, into homes where there was no children for them to communicate with in that home, and they were being used as sex slaves.